Acha Janab, Assalamu alaikum. This is Sheikh Bilal Haq, and the topic of today's discussion is performance measurement, yeah, performance management technique. In the last class, we had discussed the financial ratios. We have discussed some of the financial ratios. You can see those topics on my YouTube channel as well. In today's class, what we will be discussing is we will be going through the other ratios that we haven't discussed right now, and we'll be seeing what is the interpretation of these ratios. So just a quick recap of the last class. What we had seen was, if we see the ROS ratio, that is, in the last class we have discussed 2 or 3 ratios, in fact 3 ratios. We have seen the return on capital employed, which stated that operating profit divided by capital employed. So this was the thing that we had seen in our last class. You guys are well aware how to calculate the capital employed. Now this ratio was equivalent to the multiplication of return on sales with asset turnover. So the return on sales is the operating profit divided by the sales or revenue figure multiplied by the asset turnover ratio. And the asset turnover ratio basically can be interpreted by using this formula of sales divided by capital employed. So we can use this formula in order to interpret the ratios. So in a nutshell, after multiplying, if there is a multiplicative element, the numerators can be deducted with the denominators if they are the same. So what in nutshell I get is ROCE, that is operating profit divided by capital employed, is equivalent to ROS. If I basically eliminate the two sales on the opposing sides, I'll be getting the answer of operating profit divided by capital employed. So this is the thing that we had discussed in our last class. In today's class, we'll move forward with other topics. We had also seen 2 differing ratios, that is current ratio and quick ratio, or acid test ratio. So current ratio stated current asset divided by current liabilities. And quick ratio could be comprehended by using the formula of current asset minus inventory divided by current liabilities. So moving forward, after discussing current and quick ratio, okay, remember the inventory is always the closing inventory. Now measuring activities, asset turnover, we have already discussed asset turnover. Now let's move. Okay, I'm also making a list at the end of the page of the different ratios that we have already discussed. Let's make a list as well. Let's make a list on page number 10. So guys, we have already seen 5 different ratios. The first one was the return on capital employed, which could be formulated in the form of operating profit divided by capital employed. And remember one thing, if we talk about capital employed, so we can calculate capital employed by basically adding up the non-current liabilities together with the total equity. So this is our first formula that we had seen in the last class, and we know it well how to comprehend this formula. So the second one was return on sales. And return on sales can be calculated by dividing the operating profit by sales, or in other words, we can call it revenue. The third formula that we'll talk about is the asset turnover, which may be calculated by using the sales or the revenue shall be divided by capital employed. Revenue shall be divided by capital employed. Then we move towards the fourth ratio, and that is current ratio. Current ratio may be calculated by dividing current assets over current liabilities. Then we went for the fifth one, that is quick or acid test ratio, which stated that we need to deduct the closing inventory from our current asset, and as discussed in our last class, minus closing inventory whole divided by current liabilities. So these are the 5 ratios that we have done up till now. And if I move to the original slides, let's discuss what we had seen in our previous classes. Okay, so now I'm moving towards the inventory days ratio. Inventory days ratio may be calculated by inventory divided by cost of sale into 365. Remember, this ratio is calculated on days basis. There are certain ratios that might be calculated in the form of percentage. There are other ratios that may be calculated in the form of days. Because inventory days, as I have told you way before in each and every class of performance measurement, that you need to see the denominator and you need to compare the denominator with the numerator. So this indicates that an average number of days that an inventory item that are held before they are sold. Cost of sale is used in this calculation as opening inventory plus purchases less closing inventory equals to the inventory that is being held. Sometimes a business might want to look at the specific line of the inventory, so more detailed information may be required. So let's draft an example of such a ratio. Okay, let's draft an example of such a ratio. Okay, so first of all, how to calculate cost of sales. Now, if I'm about to calculate the cost of sales, how will you calculate the cost of sales? The most easiest formula of calculating the cost of sale is opening inventory. I'll be getting the opening inventory, add purchases. So the result that I'll get is not cost of sales, not cost of sales. I'll be getting a result of cost of goods available for sales, because a company only have two types of items available for sale. The first one is the opening inventory and the second one is the purchaser. The company has two type of item available for sale. So I'll be getting the cost of goods that are available for sale, and after deducting the closing inventory, after reducing the closing inventory, I'll be getting an answer of cost of goods sold. So this is the answer that I want to use in my formula. I'll be getting this answer of cost of goods sold. And this is the answer that I'll be using in my formula. Okay? Now, if suppose I get a question. Now, what I need to calculate is, what are we discussing right now is to calculate the inventory days ratio. Inventory days ratio is calculated by dividing the inventory with cost of goods sold and multiplying it by 365, that is the number of days that are available in a year. So I'm calculating the inventory days ratio. And inventory days ratio is calculated by dividing the inventory. Now, what do you mean by inventory? Inventory can be opening inventory. Inventory can be closing inventory. So what basically is inventory, sir? How do you calculate the inventory? So let's discuss this. Let's read this out. Then we'll be getting to know what he is trying to say in regard with what he actually means by the word inventory. This indicates the average number of days that an inventory item are held for before they are being sold. Cost of sales is used to in this calculation as opening plus inventory. ये सारी बात इसने की हुई है. Sometimes a business might want to look at the specific line of inventory, so in detail information may be required. An increase in the inventory is holding period. Okay, so what I can interpret from this particular discussion is that by the word inventory, so inventory days ratio is calculated by using a formula. Let me write this formula where I've written all those formulas. Let me write this over here. We are basically talking about the seventh one. We have discussed 6 different formulas. In fact, 5 different formulas. I'll be talking about the 6th one. So the 6th formula that we are discussing right now is the inventory days ratio. Sir, how do we calculate inventory days ratio? Is by dividing the inventory, that is the closing inventory, by cost of sales and multiplying it by 365. Multiplying it by 365. So let us draft an example. Inventory days ratio. The simplest or the most simplest form of example can be, let's suppose we are giving a question in which the question says that the sales of the company is 7 lakh rupees, and the cost of goods sold constitute 60% of the sales, and the closing inventory is basically 40% of COGS. The closing inventory is 40% of cost of goods sold. Now the question is asking us to calculate inventory days ratio. So this is the most simplest form of example that we can do right now. We are being given sales. So what will be the amount of cost of goods sold? You guys can pause this video and you can calculate the amount of cost of goods sold. I guess 7 6 of 42. So I get an answer of 4,20,000 will be our cost of goods sold. Now, if I say that the closing inventory is basically 40% of COGS, so I'm getting an answer of 4,20,000 as my COGS multiplied by 40%. So this makes an answer of 1,68,000. My COGS or my closing inventory is 1,68,000 will be my closing inventory. Now let us calculate the inventory days ratio, which is calculated by dividing the closing inventory whole divided by COGS, and this entire formula is being multiplied by 365 days. So what is my closing inventory I'll be getting? My closing inventory is 1,68,000. 1,68,000 is my closing inventory. My COGS is 4,20,000 is my COGS multiplied by 365. The answer that I'll be getting will be in days. So in order to comprehend my answer, I'll be dividing 1,68,000, that is my closing inventory, whole divided by 4,20,000, that is the COGS multiplied by 365. It gives me an answer of 146 days. How do you interpret this? Although in F2, you won't be asked to interpret it. But still, in order to get to know the entire in-depth knowledge of a particular ratio, you need to know how to comprehend the interpretation of that ratio. So, by 146 days, I mean that my inventory basically takes 146 days to be sold out, or in order to sell one unit, you need to wait for 146 days. Now, such a company, think of example of certain companies whose inventories are being sold after 146 days. Let's take an example of construction companies. Normally, the houses that we construct are being sold after 3 months, 4 months. It takes huge amount of time. Basically, if I consider if I think about the companies, what immediate example that comes into my mind is the company in which the inventory is basically of a huge amount of money. In order to get those inventories, those companies that sell inventories that are not normal goods, that are basically the luxurious item. I can classify, let's suppose, a car industry. I can classify a state agency industry, or any other industry whose commodity is not of a common not of a common wealth, or normally people don't tend to buy their commodities. So Such commodities are being sold. Such businesses might be sold after 146 days. Let's draft another example. Let's suppose the the opening inventory of a company is 30,000 and the purchases of that particular company is, let's suppose, 1,70,000. So this gives me an answer of cost of goods available for sale. So cost of goods available for sale is 2 lakh. And the closing inventory that I'll be having is, let's suppose, 20,000. So my cost of good sold is 1,80,000. The question asked me to calculate the inventory days ratio. And each and every person, each and every student right now knows the formula of calculating the inventory days ratio. It's very simple. Closing inventory divided by the cost of goods sold multiplied by 365. So my closing inventory is 20,000. My cost of goods sold is 1,80,000. Multiplying by 365. I guess you should have paused this video and you should have calculated on your own self. So let me calculate 20,000. If I divide 20,000 by 1,80,000, so I'll be getting an answer of 0.11 multiplied by 365. 40 days. Each and every unit takes on an average 40 days in order to be sold, or in order to go to the code from in order to get out of our company's godown to the premises of our customers. So I guess ye काफी हद तक you guys would have understood what I'm trying to say in regard with the inventory days ratio. So up till now, what are the formulas that we have studied? Let's see once again. Okay, sir. So we have seen return on capital employed, return on sales, asset turnover, inventory turnover. Let me rephrase or renumber this, and let me write it again. I guess that has been written on some further slides. Sorry, this one is the fourth one. Fifth one that we had seen already is current ratio, which could be comprehended in the form of current assets whole divided by current liabilities. Sixth one was quick or acid test ratio. This formula was in the form of current asset minus closing inventory whole divided by current liabilities. I told you guys this formula is the most favorite one for the bankers. In order to get the loan, the company need to give this formula so that they can basically assess what are the company's quick or quickly convertible to cash ratio in regard with the current liabilities. So let's come to the receivable days ratio. Now, the company is about to know that, okay, if my particular unit that I'm trying to sell is being sold after 40 or 50 days, what is the time period that we take, or that the customer takes on an average in regard with our company to return the amount of money which they have basically taken in the form of credit sales. So receivable days ratio basically means the receivables divided by the credit sales whole multiplied by the 365. Same, these ratios are also calculated. These ratios are calculated on the basis of days. And this is the average time period that it takes for a company is receivable to pay what they owe. Sometimes the breakdown of revenue into cash and credit sales is not available, in which case the revenues is used in place of credit sales. And it is assumed, beta यहाँ पे कहता है that sometimes you won't be given, देखो, in this formula I've been given and I've been dividing the credit sales. However, if I'm not given the credit sales, it is assumed that we'll be going for the sales or revenue that we are being given. An increase in the receivable days ratio indicates that the company is struggling to manage its debts. Possible step to reduce to include. Now, you don't need to go for the theoretical aspect. Let us study what do you mean by receivable days ratio. Okay, so now we are discussing about receivable days ratio. The most beautiful formula for a company in order to assess if they are basically managing their debts in an accurate manner or they are struggling to manage their debts. Now, in order to calculate the receivable days ratio, I need to divide receivables divided by credit sales all multiplied by 365. Let me keep this formula onto the sheet in which we are recording. Now this one is the 7th formula, receivable days ratio is equal to receivables, or I can safely say the closing receivables divided by credit sales whole multiplied by 365. Or let's suppose we are not basically given the credit sales, so we can use this formula as well. Receivable days ratio is equal to receivables divided by revenue multiplied by 365. So this is the formula that we are basically discussing about right now. Receivable days ratios is the receivables divided by credit sales. And let us draft an example so that we get to know the insight of this formula. Let us draft an example where were we? Okay, so receivable days ratio, let's suppose in a question we are given an example of receivables of a company. Let's make a simplest form of example. Receivable of a company is, let's suppose, 3 lakh rupees, and the total credit sales is, let's suppose, 7 lakh rupees. Now, in order to get to know the receivable days ratio, let me find out the answer using this portion. I'll be dividing the receivables by credit sales and multiplying by 365. Sorry. So my receivables are 300,000 whole divided by 700,000 multiplied by 365. So let me calculate this. If I divide 300,000 divided by 700,000 multiplied by 365, oh my god, I'm getting an answer of 156 days. On an average, it takes 156 days. So how many months does it take for a company to recover its debt? If I divide this by 30, it takes on an average 5 months Sir, how is this month being calculated? Considering in a particular month there are 30 days. If I divide 156 by 30, I'll be getting 5 months. So it takes a company to recover their amount of the sales value of the credit sales around 156 or 5 months in order to recover that particular amount for which they have sold their goods for. It's not a good company. Normally, the company should have at least the company should have maximum of 2 or 3 months, not more than that. But normally, the general norm that we follow is that we should have 60 or 90 days, not more than that. But still, for calculative purpose, you need to find out. Okay, so let me draft another example. Now, question. Now, what you guys will be doing is after drafting of this example, you will be pausing this video and you will be calculating the receivable days ratio. Once you have calculated, then you may see the answer. So the company sales is, I'm obsessed with the word 7. I don't know why. Company sales is 5,60,000, I suppose. And out of this, the company has indicated that credit sales is 60% of total sales. And the closing receivables are 1,20,000. Required, you need to calculate the receivable days ratio. Now pause this video and calculate the receivable days ratio, then come back and verify your answer. Now if I calculate receivable days ratio, I need to divide my closing receivables by my credit sales and then multiplying by 365. So, but I don't know what my credit sales are. But however, I know that my closing receivables are 1,20,000. If I divide 1,20,000 by, but first I need to calculate the credit sales. My credit sales will be 60% of the total sales amount. So 5,60,000 multiplied by 60%, I'll be getting an answer of 3,36,000 whole multiplied by 365 days. In order to get the answers in days, I'll have to multiply it by 365. So 1,20,000 divided by 336. I guess 60% of, yes, it's 336. So 120 divided by 336 whole multiplied by 365. I'll be getting an answer of 130 days in order to receive my amount of money. So it's a good ratio. Comparatively better than the previous question. Comparatively better than over here, the company was struggling more because this particular ratio is it's basically 26 days more than the next question that we did. So let us draft another question because I guess this is the most favorable part of examiner as well. Let us draft another question. The company is being told that the cash sales of the company is 30,000 and the total sales of the company is 1,90,000. However, the receivables of this particular company is 20,000. Calculate the receivable days ratio. Pause this video and calculate it, then come back and verify your answer. So if I calculate the receivable days ratio, I'll be using a formula of receivable which we are given in the form of 20,000 divided by credit sales, whole multiplied by 365. Okay, so my receivables are 20,000 divided by credit sales. Credit sales are, so if my total sales are 1,90,000 and my cash sales are 30,000, so this means that my credit sales are 1,60,000. Sorry, multiplied by 365. So I'll be getting an answer of 20,000 divided by 1,60,000. 20,000 divided by 1,60,000 multiplied by 365. 45.625. Let me draft another example. As I've told you, this is the most favorable part of examiner. Let us leave 1 or 2 pages and let us draft an example question. So I'm being given the cash sales, which is equivalent to 5,70,000. Credit sales is equivalent to 40% of total sales. Now I'm being told to calculate required. You need to calculate the credit sales. I will be using the most simplest form of formula for this particular question. What I can use is, I can use the formula of cash sales plus credit sales is equal to total sales. Let us assume that we aren't given the total sales. So what we can do is, we can keep total sales as an X because we'll be finding out the value of X. However, we are being given the value of cash sales, which is equivalent to 5,70,000. Now, in order to calculate the credit sales, what I'll be doing is, I've been given that credit sales constitute 40% of the total sales. If my total sales are X, so credit sales means a 40% of X. Let me simplify this formula. 5,70,000 plus, if I simplify 40%, this means 0.4x is equal to X. Let me simplify it further. 5,70,000. If I transfer this positive 0.4x on the other side of equal to, this will be converted into X. Positive sign will be converted into the opposite sign, that is negative sign. X is equal to X minus 0.4x. And if there is nothing with X, the mathematical notation states that X is considered to be 1. So 5,70,000 is equal to 1x minus 0.4x. So 5,70,000 is equal to 0.6x. So after simplifying this, X is equal to 5,70,000 divided by 0.6, because it's being multiplied on the other side of equal to. If I take this thing, if I take 0.6 on the other side of equal to, I'll be dividing this by 5,70,000. So 5,70,000 divided by 0.6, I'll be getting an answer of 9,50,000. So X is equal to 9,50,000. Sir, if you are correct, then our cash sales plus credit sales is equal to total sales. My cash sales are 5,70,000 My credit sales are 9,50,000. This give me an answer of, I guess, 10 lakh 950 plus 570 is 15 lakh 20,000 rupees. The most simplified formula. Now, if I'm given with the, let's suppose, receivables, I'll be dividing those receivables. So up till now, how many formulas have we discussed? We have discussed 7 formulas. Let us discuss one more. That is payable days ratio. Same logic, same theme. Payable days ratios is equal to payables, that is closing payables, divided by the credit purchases multiplied by 365. So let me draft another question in regard with the payable days ratio as well. So formula, the eighth formula that we'll be doing is payable days ratio. Payable days ratio. What we'll be doing is payables divided by, what was the formula that we were using? Payables divided by the credit purchases multiplied by 365. Payable divided by credit purchases whole multiplied by 365. Let me draft an example. Let's suppose I'm being given the payables of a company, 2,30,000, total purchases. The total purchases of a company, which is equivalent to, 2,30,000, which is equivalent to 9,40,000. And the requirement of this question is calculate payable days ratio. Now, if I want to calculate the payable days ratio, if I want to calculate the payable days ratio, what I need to do is I need to divide the payables divided by purchases multiplied by 365. My payables are 2,30,000 whole divided by 9,40,000 multiplied by 365. Let me simplify my answer. 2,30,000 divided by 9,40,000 multiplied by 365. I'll be getting an answer of 89 days. Now the magical element is this ratio can be better understood along with the receivable and the payable days ratio. Let me draft an example in which we'll be calculating both the receivables and the payable days ratio. Now, in order to basically justify your answer, or in order to comprehend your answer in a better situation, or in order to assess whether the company is struggling hard or whether the company is in the advantageous position, we can draft an example. Let's suppose the opening inventory, let me draft it in another way. I'll be discussing the receivable days ratio and the payable days ratio. Remember one thing, receivable days ratio is being calculated using the formula of receivable divided by credit sales. Payable days ratio is calculated by using the formula of payable divided by payable divided by purchases. Receivable divided by credit sales, payable divided by credit purchases. Okay. So my receivables of a company is 1,35,000 and my total sales of this company is 7,90,000, out of which the credit sales is 50%. On the other hand, the purchases of this company is 70,000, along with the credit purchases are 25%, and the payable amount is 5,000 rupees. Now you are being told the requirement of this question is number one. In fact, I'll be calculating this right now. Number one is calculate the receivable. In fact, we'll be calculating both the ratios, receivable and payable days ratio. So let me calculate the receivable days ratio. Receivable days ratio is equal to the receivable divided by divided by credit sales multiplied by 365. Okay, so I've been given a receivable amount that is 1,35,000. The credit sales is 7,90,000 multiplied by 50%. I'll be getting an answer. Of 7,90,000 multiplied by 0.5, that is 3,95,000. 3,95,000 multiplied by 365 days. So 135 divided by 395 multiplied by 365 days. It takes 124 days to recover the amount of sales. That is the recoverability of the amount of credit sales. Now let me calculate the payable days ratio. Now the payable days ratio is the payables divided by credit purchases multiplied by 365. My payables are 5,000. Credit purchases is 25% of the purchases. So if my purchases amount is 70,000 and they say 25%, 17,500, 17,500 whole multiplied by 365, I will be getting an answer of 5 divided by 17.5 multiplied by 365, 104 days. Now let me interpret a beautiful conclusion of such a company. See this. The receivable days ratio of this company is 124 days. And the payable days ratio of the company is 104 days. This means that the company pays the amount of its credit purchases after 104 days. However, they receive the amount associated with credit sales after 124 days. So it's a struggling situation for the company. So up till now, we have seen 8 different formulas. Let me give you a quick recap. Return on capital employed, that is ROS, return on sales, asset turnover ratio. Then we had seen inventory days ratio, current ratio, quick ratio, that is asset test ratio, receivable days ratio, and last but not the least, the payable days ratio. Let's keep this class up till now. I'll be giving you another lecture on the same topic, inshallah, next time. Till then, Allah Hafiz. This is Sheikh Bilal Haq signing off.